Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Opa. Today's section, I quickly run with you the Ischioanal Fossa. Now be informed that this Ischioanal Fossa, which otherwise previously referred to as Ischiorectal Fossa, is that adipose tissue filled with space that is of course found on either side of the anal canal. Okay, of course we know that this anal canal will dwell in of course the anal triangle of the perineum. Okay, that region in between our thighs. Now one thing that we know is that because of course we say it is adipose tissue filled with space, then tells us that the main content as far as the Ischioanal Fossa is concerned, yes, is going to be fat. But in addition to fat, we have some important neurovascular structures that run transversely across this fossa. And these structures can therefore get injured. Okay, they are liable to injury whenever this area, which is very prone to abscess formation, that abscess is drained. Okay, these structures can easily get injured. So it means that the knowledge of this area very well will help you so that you don't cause injury to those important neurovascular structures. So at the end of this section, we will be able to tell the boundaries of this Ischioanal Fossa, and of course look at the important contents of this Anal Fossa, apart from the fact we all know about. And so without much ado, let's set the ball rolling, looking at this Ischioanal Fossa. So there we are. Now I told you that the region in between our thighs is the perineum. And so how do we know the perineum? This, look at where the cursor is running. This diamond-shaped region is of course known as the perineum. This perineum is therefore found below what we call the pelvic, floor muscles, or the muscles that form the pelvic diaphragm. Okay. Now one thing that we know is that anterior, let me give you some bit of orientation. Anteriorly connecting these two oscosae, these two hip bones together, is what we call this fibrocartilaginous structure known as symphysis pubis. Okay, and therefore posteriorly, the posterior most, I see what we call the tip of the coccyx. Yes, on the lateral aspect, okay, laterally I see this bone that we sit on. Okay, the ischial tuberosity. These are the ischial tuberosities. Okay, ischial tuberosities. And anterolaterally we see this bony prominence over here, this bone over here, coming from what we call the inferior ramus of the pubis, and of course the ramus of the ischium. Yes, that is the ischiopubic ramus. Yes, on either side, ischiopubic rami. Okay, yes, apart from that, if I go posterolaterally, there's this ligament all the way from the ischial tuberosity to of course the sacrum and the coccyx, and that ligament is known as the sacrotuberous ligament, sacrotuberous ligament. So of course we know this boundaries, okay, so that it gives us this diamond-shaped region, and that's the perineum. And of course with the help of these ischial tuberosities, okay, connecting the anterior margins of these two ischial tuberosities, then we are able to divide this diamond-shaped perineum into a smaller anterior triangle, okay, because the smaller anterior triangle will be bearing of course the genitals, external genitalia, as well as of course the that of the urethral openings. And that is why we will call this smaller anterior triangle the urogenital triangle. And that of the posterior triangle, okay, that larger triangle which we are calling the posterior triangle because it's bearing the anal canal, we are going to call it the anal triangle. Okay, so that is what we see. Now those of you who have not watched the perineum that I've done, yes, I've dealt with these kind of boundaries of the this urogenital triangle, the various contents in of course the deep and superficial perineal pouches. We've dealt with those ones. Now today, what is important for us is to look at what we call the Ischioanal Fossa. Okay, the Ischioanal Fossa. Now we are calling this Ischioanal Fossa, yes, for the reason that it is found between, yes, the ischium over here and the anal canal. This fossa, this potential space that we have over here, these represent what we call the Ischioanal Fossae. Ischioanal Fossae. So the next thing that we have to know, then what are the boundaries of this Ischioanal Fossa? Okay, so the beginning point of the of this Ischioanal Fossa is where the perineum, okay, or is where actually what we call the urogenital triangle ends. And one important thing that we know about the urogenital triangle is that this urogenital triangle has a diaphragm. Okay, apart from the pelvic, diaphragm being at the superior portion, below it is having a diaphragm. That's the urogenital diaphragm. And this urogenital diaphragm is having two layers. Okay, we are having a deep layer, of course, a superficial layer, which of course that superficial layer, okay, or the inferior layer of the urogenital diaphragm is known as the perineal membrane. So this white stone that you find over here, okay, represent the superficial, layer of the urogenital diaphragm, also known as the perineal membrane. So by way of the anterior boundary of this fossa that we have over here, we have the posterior, extremity, or the posterior aspect, or the posterior end of what we call the perineal membrane, forming the anterior extremity of this, what do you call it, ischioanal fossa. Okay, now the next one is for us to look at how about the posterior extremity. Now for us to know the posterior extremity, then of course that ligament over here, now there's anterior, so the posterior over here, that ligament which is spanning all the way from the ischial tuberosity to, of course, that of the sacroiliac, the sacrotuberous ligament. So the sacrotuberous ligament is forming what we call the posterior boundary of this, ischioanal fossa. Not only that, so let me show you the other posterior boundary. Now if you look at it, this one I've taken a cut section of what we call the sacrotuberous ligament. This is the cut section of the sacrotuberous ligament. And you also find attached, overlying that one, find attachment over there will be the largest muscle that we have in the human body. Yes, find itself in the gluteal region. That is the Gluteus Maximus muscle. Okay, that one is also forming what we call, now this is the fossa, okay, forming the posterior, extremity or boundary of what we call the ischioanal fossa. Okay, so that is what we are going to see. Now, how about what we call the lateral boundary? So the lateral boundary that we have over here, okay, there's the lateral aspect. The lateral boundary that we have over here is, there's this muscle which of course, it leaves the pelvis through what we call the lesser sciatic, foramen, and that muscle is what we call the obturator internus muscle. And you know that this obturator internus muscle has its own fascial covering that is known as the obturator fascia. Okay, that is what we are going to find over here. And as we go on, I will tell you that this obturator fascia will be very important in forming something we call Urogenital Canal or the Pudendal Canal, which will allow for the transmission of some important structures, okay, which of course two of them, yes, we'll look at them. Okay, so that is, one thing that you have to know. So the obturator internus muscle alongside its fascia will contribute to what we call the lateral boundary of this fossa. Remember that this is the medial boundary because we are having the anal canal in the midline. So the medial boundary, yes, is rather formed by what force? We said there's the anal canal. And surrounding the anal canal, now if I look at this over here, surrounding the anal canal, I have this sphincter, which of course is made of smooth muscle coming from thickening of the, inner circular layer of the smooth muscle of, what we call the anal canal. Because of course the tubular organ of the postpharyngeal gut is going to have that one. So that one is what we call internal anal sphincter. That one is smooth muscle. But even external or lateral, okay, to what we call internal anal sphincter, I have what we call external anal sphincter. So the one you find over here surrounding this one, okay, that is made of skeletal muscle fibers, okay, is what we call the external anal sphincter. Guys, one thing that you have to know about this external anal sphincter is that it's having, three components. That one which is very close to the skin, okay, just in that, fat over there, and that's the subcutaneous component. Then we have the superficial and of course the deep components of what we call the external anal sphincter. Okay, so that is the external anal sphincter, forming what we call the medial boundary of the ischioanal fossa. But one thing that we know is that, yes, we say that this pelvic diaphragm or the pelvic floor muscles, they are forming the superior boundary. But then they slide downwards, okay? They slide downwards, okay, coming medially. And they also contribute to what we call the medial boundary of the ischiorectal fossa, okay, or the ischioanal fossa. So this one, okay, represent what we call the levator ani of the pelvic floor. So as you can see over here, the levator ani also contribute to what we call the medial boundary of this fossa. So the fossa will be somewhere here, okay, this area. And medially, I'm having the external anal sphincter, as well as, of course, if I go a bit upwards, I find what we call the levator ani, muscles. Now, one thing that I told you is that this area, this anal fossa, is less vascularized, okay? It's, less vascularized. There's, little blood supply over here. And this area is therefore liable to abscess formation. A lot of abscess can form over here. And one thing that you know is that if there's one abscess formed, let's say to the right side of the ischioanal fossa, it can spread to the left, and that vice versa. The reason is that there's that kind of communication, channel. Okay, there's a connection between the right and left ischioanal fossae, and that one is a recess which, of course, we say that how the infectious fluid was spread, it takes this kind of horseshoe appearance. That is why the recess, that connection between what we call the two, left and right anal fossae, okay, is referred to as the horseshoe, recess. Okay, that is one thing I want you to know over here. Now, one thing that I want to also tell you is that between, of course, the internal and, of course, external anal sphincters, okay, there's a potential space, which, of course, we want to call it intersphincteric, space. Okay, that is one thing. So, as I indicated to you, you can see that there are a lot of neurovascular structures which are running transversely, okay, in this ischioanal fossa. So, if there's abscess, then care must be taken so that we don't cause injury to them. Okay, now let's take a coronal section and then look at these boundaries once again. Okay, so in the coronal section, now what do we see? Showing this ischioanal fossa, this region over here. Then one thing that we've said is that, although we don't see it here by way of revision, we said that anteriorly will be the posterior margin of what we call the perineal membrane. We said posteriorly we are going to have the sacrotuberous ligament alongside what we call the largest muscle in the human body, being the gluteus maximus muscle. Yes, of course, we also say that medially, okay, the anal canal is there, and then surrounding the anal canal, yes, we have internal anal sphincter, but important, the one is forming the direct boundary. Okay, this is the fossa, okay, that we find over here. The one who is forming that direct medial boundary is going to be what we call the external anal sphincter. Not only that, even the levator ani will slide downwards medially, okay, to form part of what we call the medial boundary of what we call the ischioanal fossa. Okay, so the levator ani and, of course, external anal sphincter doing that. Then, saying that, of course, laterally, okay, we are going to have this muscle, okay, which, of course, we said it runs in what we call the lesser sciatic foramen. That muscle is known as the obturator internus muscle. Okay, forming the lateral boundary. But not only that, even alongside its fascia, and that is why what is going to happen is that the fascia of this obturator internus muscle, okay, alongside, okay, another fascia that we find over here, this fascia is known as the lunate fascia. Now, guys, the lunate fascia, okay, also contribute to the formation of this canal over here, which, of course, we see it in the inferolateral aspect of this fossa. Okay, this canal over here is known as Pudendal Canal, of course, because it's in that kind of it's going to bear some important structures. Okay, I'll talk about those structures. Okay, now those structures, of course, if you've watched the video that I've done on the perineum, okay, you realize that the ischial spine will be related to three important structures, and those three important structures were, of course, the pudendal nerve, yes, internal pudendal vessels, and, of course, nerve to obturator internus. Now, nerve to obturator internus will supply obturator internus muscle, so no problem, it won't go beyond that. And so those one which will be content of this canal, okay, and that is why we are calling it pudendal canal, will be, of course, pudendal nerve and, of course, internal pudendal vessels. That's why we're giving the name pudendal canal. But, of course, the same canal is having an eponym known as Alcock's canal, that kind of somewhat, giving, that kind of credit to, Benjamin Alcock. That is ALCOCK''S, someone's name beginning with capital A. Okay, that is that canal, okay, to bear those, neurovascular structures. Okay, so that is, one thing that we do. Now, I told you that this canal is contributed mainly by the obturator fascia. Now, but how about the lunate fascia we are talking about? Whenever we talk about lunate fascia, okay, that fascia is formed from, elevation of the deep fascia. Now, the deep fascia over here, okay, is elevated. The deep fascia in this ischioanal fossa is raised, okay, by the fat over here. And when it is raised, yes, it contributes to the formation of this. And that fascia, we give it the name as what we call the lunate fascia. Yes, having that kind of lunar appearance, lunate fascia. Okay, so that is what you have to know. So I'm talking about these neurovascular structures. Now, these neurovascular structures are safe. So if I want to drain, if there's any abscess formation over here, they are more towards the lateral aspect. And so they are less liable to injury. Okay, they are enclosed in that canal only. but there are some branches of this one which will be running, okay, transversely to supply the lower aspect of the rectum, and that is why we call those ones inferior rectal nerve. And of course the vessels will also be running, transversely in this manner. So if I should show you this one, okay, what you are going to see is that you have some vessels, okay, running, so those ones which are safe within the canal, okay, they are those kind of pudendal nerve. Then of course internal pudendal vessels. And whenever I talk about vessels, then we are talking about the artery and of course the corresponding vein. But they all give off some branches to run transversely, okay, to supply the lower aspect of the rectum. And that is why this one, the branch which will be coming from the pudendal nerve, yes, is known as inferior rectal nerve. The one which is coming, okay, from what we call internal pudendal artery will be, of course, inferior rectal, artery. Then the one which will of course be draining, because a tributary of this, internal pudendal vein, okay, will be what we call inferior rectal vein. Okay, so these structures are the three main structures that if there's any abscess formed over here, then care must be taken so that we don't cause injury, to these structures. Okay. Now, one thing I want you to also know is that there's this fascia over here, even apart from this, Ischioanal Fossa. Okay, there's this fascia which of course will help us, so that below this fascia, where is this, anal fascia, okay, we are going to have what we call this fascia over here, which of course also filled with fat. That is known as the anal space. Okay, so that one, that's what we are saying. So this is, the reason why care must be taken, so that if there's any abscess formed over here, okay, you take care so that you don't cause injury to these neurovascular structures. All right, I'm very grateful for your time this evening. I hope you find it helpful. Have a good night, all of you, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Amen.